Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. This is the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for April 18th, 2022. Can we have the roll?
Greg Strike.
Here.
Andre Spinelli.
Here.
Jared Gardner.
Here.
Radhika Krishna.
Here.
Jim Winchester.
Here.
Scott Polis.
Here.
Jeff Ron.
Here.
Brandy Eber is excused. You have a quorum.
Okay, we'll move on to disclosures. Commissioner Polis.
No disclosures.
Commissioner Winchester.
No disclosures.
Commissioner Krishna.
No disclosures.
Commissioner Spinelli.
No disclosures.
Commissioner Ron.
Nothing to disclose.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Ron. Commissioner Strike.
No disclosures.
And no disclosures for myself. And then I guess that's all the preliminaries we have. We'll move straight ahead to our public hearing items. Before we begin, I'll read the procedure by which the public may speak to the commission at its meetings. After the staff presentation is completed on public hearing items, the chair will ask for public testimony on the issue. Those who wish to testify will follow the time limits established in the commission rules of procedure. Petitioners, including all his or her representatives, will receive 10 minutes. Part of this time may be reserved for rebuttal. Representatives of groups, community councils, PTAs, etc. will receive 5 minutes. Individuals will receive 3 minutes. When your testimony is complete, you may be asked questions by the commission. You may only testify once on any issue unless questioned by the commission. An individual may have appeal rights relating to any action the Planning and Zoning Commission takes, except commission recommendations to the Assembly which are not appealable. Appeals must be filed with the clerk's office within 20 days after approval by the Planning and Zoning Commission of the resolution, which is the commission's final decision. A fee for the appeal is required at the time of filing. So the first case on the agenda is 2022-0030. Can we hear the report from staff, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening. This is a request for a conditional use permit to allow for the development of a new heliport within the PLI, the Public Lands and Institutions District. The site will be operated by the Alaska Department of Public Safety and will be used as a landing and takeoff pad for a single emergency response helicopter. The proposed heliport will replace the existing one located along Tudor Road in front of the Department of Public Safety's headquarters. The existing heliport is near overhead transmission lines, large amounts of motorized and non-motorized traffic traveling along Tudor Road, and a large parking lot. Relocating the heliport to the proposed location will alleviate the safety concerns associated with these obstructions nearby. The site is located along Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue. The proposed use will be located within an undeveloped parcel totaling approximately 6 acres in size, but the area of disturbance will not exceed approximately a half acre. The Planning Department has reviewed the application and does present the following findings for the consideration of the Commission this evening. For approval criteria 1, we do believe the criteria is met. The petition site is classified as community facility or institution per the 2040 Anchorage Land Use Plan map, and the proposed use is consistent with this classification. In addition, the following goals and policies of Anchorage 2040 apply to this case, and that would be Goal 7, Policy 44, and Policy 50. There are no conflicts with the dimensional standards in Chapter 6. There is sufficient landscaping on site that exists. There's quite a large amount of mature vegetation that will meet the landscaping requirements as required in Chapter 7. For approval criteria 2, we do believe the criteria is met. The petition site is zoned PLI, which permits heliports subject to the approval of a conditional use permit. The PLI district is intended to provide a sufficient land base for the establishment of public and quasi-public facilities, and the proposed facility will be operated in a manner that is consistent with this intent. For approval criteria 3, we do believe the criteria is met. The use-specific standards for heliport are all met, and we do believe that the request is in compliance with them. For approval criteria 4, we do believe the criteria is met. The petition site is approximately 6 acres in size, and the topography is generally flat, and the shape of the lot is roughly rectangular. Although the parcel measures 6 acres in size, the area of disturbance is only approximately half an acre. The proposed site design and maintenance plan allows for adequate space for helicopter takeoffs and landings, and the site is not intended to provide off-street parking for any other type of emergency vehicle beyond helicopter. Very little mature vegetation will be removed from the site, and because of this, the landing area will largely be screened from view from the adjacent rights-of-way. For approval criteria 5, we do believe the criteria is met. The surrounding neighborhood and properties are all zoned PLI. Various public facilities such as the Alaska Department of Public Safety Headquarters, the Alaska State Crime Lab, the Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities Maintenance Garage, and the Alaska State Medical Examiner's Office are all located in close proximity. The majority of the proposed facilities operations will take place sporadically on an as-needed basis. Because of this, it is unlikely that the presence of this use will have a negative effect on the character of the surrounding area. This heliport will be used for public safety and emergency response operations and is appropriately located within the PLI. There should be no significant impact to surrounding properties that would substantially limit, impair, or prevent the use of their properties in a lawful manner. For approval criteria 6, we do believe the criteria is met. The operation of helicopters at low altitude is inherently noisy and generates a strong downdraft which can alarm passerby, wildlife, and blows dust and other small debris outwards from the heliport area. However, the minimal use of the site, which is predicted to be roughly once per month, will mitigate these impacts. These disturbances will also be short in duration due to the expediency necessary in emergency situations. Only one aircraft at a time will be using the heliport, and its use will be limited to emergency operations only. It is not intended that this heliport be utilized for commercial purposes. And very minimal vegetation clearing will be necessary to prepare the site for helicopter operations. Routine mowing will be performed to maintain the area, and there'll be no additional site lighting. For approval criteria 7, we do believe the criteria is met. Any negative impacts to surrounding properties will likely only be noticed during aircraft takeoffs and landings. The applicant estimates that only one takeoff and landing per month will occur at the site. There may be more if the demand for emergency air services exceeds expectations. Additionally, this heliport will be required to operate in compliance with all local, state, and federal regulation upon beginning use. It appears that due to the minimal development envelope and operational characteristics that this facility will, by its nature, mitigate and offset any and all significant adverse impacts they may or could have on surrounding properties. For approval criteria 8, we do believe the criteria is met. The petition site has direct access to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue, which is classified as a Class 2 minor arterial in the 2014 Official Streets and Highways Plan. A Class 2 minor arterial sees between 10,000 and 20,000 daily vehicle trips, and the number of employees on site will likely not exceed that of the necessary flight crew, which would be 2 to 4 persons. Given this, it does not appear that the site will generate significant traffic, and the minor arterial serving the site is adequate to handle the anticipated traffic volumes, which will likely be de minimis. Also important to note, fixed route public transportation is available within 1/4 mile of the petition site, although it does not appear that the flight crews will be using public transportation to access the heliport. For approval criteria 9, we do believe the criteria is met. The site is located within the Anchorage Roads and Drainage Service Area, the Building Safety Service Area, Police and Fire Service Areas, and the Park Service Area. Public water is available. Public sewer service is not. However, public water and sewer services will not be required nor necessary for the proposed use. So factoring in these findings, the department does recommend approval subject to conditions 1 and 2 on page 9 of the staff report. And just want to reiterate the advisory comment on there regarding addressing. We wish that that would remain advisory only. So thank you. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Commissioner Ron.
Thank you, through the chair. Ms. Giella, do you know what this particular segment of the parcel has historically been used for? In looking at the aerial imagery, it's clear that vegetation appears different from the imagery provided. Do you have any insights, or can you provide any context there as to what this has been used for in the past?
Through the chair, Commissioner Ron, I believe the vast majority of the site has just been parkland for quite some time. I believe you're referring to the eastern side of the portion, or eastern side of the parcel that's been cleared and is regularly mowed. It's hard to say. I can only really speculate, but that particular portion of the parcel is actually within state right-of-way for Boniface. So I could speculate. Perhaps the applicant could provide some more information, but I think DOT may maintain that, maybe just as a turnaround.
Okay, if there's a representative from the applicant who can speak. You'd state your name for the record. There's also, you need to turn the mic on. There's a, yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Johan Mueller, and I'm with the Department of Public Safety. Thanks for seeing our conditional use permit. In direct response to your question, I'm only speculating, but I believe it was used for the construction, a site for the construction of Martin Luther King Drive during that time. So I think Ryan pretty well summed up our application. I think it's a good improvement to move the helicopter from in front of the out onto the road to behind where it's out of everybody's way. As long as I've been there at working with the department now for about 7 months, I've yet to see a helicopter land there. It's just strictly an emergency landing. So, and let me know if you have any questions.
Commissioner Ron, I think it looks like we've got a couple of questions, if you could hang on for a second.
Thank you through the chair. Mr. Mueller, thank you for attempting to respond. Chair, do I have the floor?
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I was referring to the applicant. He was starting to walk away. Yeah,
Okay.
you're good, Commissioner Ron. Sorry.
Thank you. We're all still learning our way here. Thank you for responding to my question of staff. I appreciate the additional information. On the lighting element, Mr. Yella in his presentation did say that no additional lighting would be installed at the site. In the FAA response, it does say that all standard marking and lighting be applied to this location. Can you speak to that? Just looking for confirmation on lighting.
So with the 7480-1 that we did apply for with the FAA, that is one of the recommendations, and we also spoke with them further about this being an exclusive state trooper landing area, and they said that their form and their recommendations are recommendations, and it's recommendations for a standard heliport, and that's why they're making those recommendations. But seeing as it's not used as that, we prefer not to do that lighting.
Okay, thank you. You've got a little over 9 minutes for rebuttal, but we can first see, I don't know if anyone who's here present is looking to speak to this case. Okay, I don't see anyone coming up, so you're welcome to take your time for rebuttal now if you have anything further you would like to add.
I appreciate your patience. This is my first time here, and let me know if, yeah, thank you.
Commissioner Krishna.
I suppose I'll ask a question to staff, which is, would it be possible under this conditional use permit for a commercial operator to operate helicopter landing in this area, or is the emergency use the only use that would be permitted?
Through the chair, Commissioner Krishna, condition of approval number 2 that states all construction shall substantially conform to the submitted application, narrative, and plans on file with the planning department or as amended through the amendment processes in Anchorage Municipal Code. That is what sticks it to the request before you. So should the commission approve this evening, there's really no mechanism under this approval that would allow a different operator to come in and begin commercial helicopter operations out of that heliport.
Thank you for that clarification.
Okay, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing on this matter then. And what is the will of the body? Commissioner Ron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In case 2022-0030, I move that the Commission approve a conditional use for a heliport in accordance with Title 21 AMC Section 21.05.040.I3, subject to conditions 1 and 2 on page 9 of the staff packet, as well as the advisory comment on page 9 of the staff packet.
And do you, Commissioner Ron, have an option? Okay, there we go, sorry, thank you. And that motion is seconded by Commissioner Polis. Commissioner Ron, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, I agree with staff's findings for items 1 through 9 in the staff packet. Appreciate the succinctness, but also providing the necessary information for us to weigh in on this matter. Given the low anticipated use and the information provided by the petitioner, it seems in keeping with what's been discussed. I intend to support the motion.
Okay, I don't see any other comments. We'll go ahead and call the vote.
Mr. Strike?
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes. Next item on the agenda is case 2022-0032. This is the request for the park master plan for Russian Jack Springs Park. Can we have a report from staff?
Thank you, Chair Gardner. And before we get started, I do want to point out a correction on page 8. Under public comments, the Northeast Community Council did provide resolutions recommending denial of the plan, and this was a typo that I just wanted to correct before we get started. So this is a request for approval of Park Master Plan for Russian Jack Springs Park per AMC 2105-040G2BIB. Russian Jack Springs Park includes 324 acres across 7 parcels and is zoned PLI-P, PLI, R3, and R2M. The park is bounded by East 6th Avenue to the north, Boniface Parkway to the east, East 20th Avenue to the south, and Pine Street to the west. DeBar Road runs east-west through the park, forming distinct north and south sections of the park. Residential subdivisions of mixed dwelling types exist adjacent to the park on all boundaries. There's a commercial district to the east at the corner of Boniface Road and DeBar Road. Figure 1 on page 3 of the staff report depicts property information and the zoning map. There are a number of developed facilities throughout Russian Jack Springs Park, including trails, sports fields, shelters, the Mann Leiser Memorial Greenhouse, the Lydia Selcraig Chalet, detailed on page 4 of the staff report. This Russian Jack Springs Park Master Plan is a 20-year vision for the development of sports and recreation facilities and represents the community's vision to provide active and healthy recreation opportunities to the surrounding community while preserving natural resources. This is an update to the 1979 and 2002 master plans. The purpose of the plan is to understand community recreation needs, develop strategies to address issues and public concerns, identify and prioritize future improvements, balance the development of new facilities with the conservation of natural areas, and develop a guiding document that provides framework for future management, maintenance, and development of the park. Following a 5-year public involvement process, the design of the Master Park Plan represents a vision of the community with the following core values: year-round community assets, serving diverse users, balance of natural areas and facilities, safe and accessible options, taking care of what they have, unique park character, and becoming an East Anchorage focal point. The Russian Jack Springs Park is comprised of 5 distinct areas: the Northwest Gateway, Northeast Gateway, Lydia Selcraig Chalet area, Boniface South Gateway, and 20th Avenue Neighborhood Gateway. These areas are defined in Figure 6 with accompanying general recommendations and preferred concepts in Figure 7, located on page 7 and 8 of the staff report. Agency reviewing and public comments are as follows. Addressing advises placement of additional addresses upon future development of core features. The Anchorage Health Department, Anchorage Water and Wastewater Utility, Private Development, Right-of-Way, and Department of Transportation have no comment or objection to this master plan. The Traffic Engineering Department recommends approval of the plan, stating that the plan adequately addresses the needs of the park to provide improvements to existing trails and infrastructure to support the multiple park uses. The plan provides a plan to improve increased parking at several areas, including the dog park, chalet, and multi-use ball fields. Watershed Management recommends approval of the plan. The University Area and Russian Jack Community Council did not provide comment as of this writing. It should be noted that both community councils were involved throughout the development of the Russian Jack Springs Park Master Plan that started in November of 2017 and continued through January 2022, detailed in Attachment 5. As corrected at the start of this report, the Northeast Community Council provided resolutions 2022-02 and 2022-05 recommending denial of the proposed master plan, requesting more time for comment and review, as well as specific design elements, also found in Attachment 5. On March 22, 2022, 2,425 public hearing notices were mailed to property owners and residents in accordance with AMC 2103020H notice. As of this writing, one comment was received in opposition of the master plan, requesting more time for a review. And it should be noted that there are supplement packets 1 and 2 for late comments, and I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. Okay, I don't see any pending questions at the moment, so we'll go ahead and look to hear from the applicant. And I should mention, as I said at the beginning, you have 10 minutes, but if you'd like to reserve any time for rebuttal, you can let us know and we can help monitor for you.
Thank you. My name is Nicolette.
Oh, I'm sorry, just 1 second. We've got it.
Great. As I mentioned, my name is Nicolette Dent, D-E-N-T. I'm a planner at Anchorage Parks and Recreation, and we're here to present the Russian Jack Springs Park Master Plan, which is an update to the 1979 and 2002 master plans and provides a guiding vision for the next 20 years of the park. So I'll plan to speak for about 7.5 minutes. A little bit more about this park. It's located in the heart of Northeast Anchorage, and it serves a very dense residential area. You can see there are 7 schools that have access to this park within a quarter-mile radius. The park's also accessible from the Chester Creek Greenbelt Trail, and the park serves as a commuter thoroughfare that connects to many other multi-use paths in Anchorage. There's a variety of natural resources in this park, including the Russian Jack Springs, which are the headwaters of the Middle Fork of Chester Creek. And it's also home to many developed facilities, such as the chalet, play areas, gathering spaces, and athletic facilities. So in updating the master plan, we aim to balance the many recreational uses of this park with preservation of its natural resources. So we set out to identify community needs, address these issues and concerns, and provide a framework to guide park management and development over the next 20 years. And we've grouped these recommendations into 6 areas of the park. So although we're building this update based on the historic plans already adopted for the park, we undertook a comprehensive public process to situate this plan in its modern context and understand modern needs. So we consulted with stakeholders at each stage of plan development, and you can find a detailed record of our outreach and public process on page 115 of your staff report. So I'll walk you through some highlights of our public process. We worked with community councils surrounding the park. We consulted the Parks and Recreation Commission along with the Watershed and Natural Resources Commission. We notified elected officials of the process and distributed mailers to park neighbors and posted on social media and posted flyers, alerting people of how to get involved. We engaged stakeholders, user groups, recreation user groups, also through interviews, one-on-one, and by forming a 15-member advisory group who worked with us throughout plan development. And that included members from both the Russian Jack and Northeast Community Council. We put together an online survey, received over 400 responses and 2,000 comments that informed the development of the plan, and most of those responses were residents of Northeast Anchorage. We had over 100 participants in 2 public meetings throughout the process to help us refine and understand what the community wanted to see in the plan. So once we ended up with a complete draft of the plan, this is around October of last year, we posted this online. We took hard copies to the chalet. So that was about 6 months ago, and we continued to work through the winter with the Russian Jack and Northeast Community Councils, leading up to the Parks and Recreation Commission hearing that was in January of this year, where we earned a resolution of support. So what we heard during this public process can be summarized into these common themes or core values that are reflected throughout the plan recommendations. We heard that the public really values the year-round seasonability of the park and that it serves diverse users of all ages and abilities. Again, it's really important to the public that this park balances natural areas with facilities that allow users to sustainably enjoy the park in the future. We heard that people wanted the park to be more secure and more accessible, and that people really wanted us to take care of the existing facilities in the park first and foremost. People also really value the long history of use and development at this park and wanted the plan to honor that unique character and to ensure that the plan continued to develop this park as an East Anchorage focal point. So applying these values to the plan, the recommendations fall under these 6 areas. There's 5 developed areas of the park, and then the 6th area focuses on the park-wide system of trails and amenities. So for each of these sections, we approach the public with a series of design concepts ranging from making no change to the park to making more significant changes and upgrades. And where we ended up most often was somewhere in the middle. So the public expressed they really wanted to see necessary upgrades for safety and access and facilities so that they can enjoy this park, but overall really wanted to maintain the character and protect natural resources. So just to walk you through some of the areas and recommendations included in the master plan, up at the northwest corner of the park, some of the recommendations include adding a non-motorized path, a multi-use path along the northern border, 6th Avenue, along with adding a landscape buffer along Pine Street, and generally upgrading athletic facilities and amenities to support recreation. Moving over to the northeast section, this is a former camping loop, which is also an off-leash dog area, and the plan really focuses on improving access by adding parking, connector trails, and better defining the dog park so that it can become a better launching point into exploring the park. Moving south to the chalet area, the plan focuses on modernizing and renovating the chalet, along with the parking area and circulation, just to really support continued community gathering in this space. And there are also surrounding facilities the plan recommends upgrading, like the Manlizer Memorial Greenhouses and the golf course, and making key safety improvements at the sledding hill that's right there. Over at the Boniface South Gateway, the plan really re-envisions this underused picnic area by improving the visibility and safety of the parking lot, and by improving the picnic shelter and opening up the lawn to encourage community gathering. On the south border of the park, this gateway, the 20th Avenue Gateway, focuses on serving neighborhood and nearby residents by revegetating a former vehicle pullout to address some safety concerns, and also constructing a paved connector trail that would lead to the multi-use trail system, and adding wayfinding and other safety upgrades. And last but not least, throughout the park, with the system of trails and amenities, one of the first priorities is to restore the existing multi-use trail to support commuters and recreational users, along with adding lighting and wayfinding throughout the park. And looking towards the future, the community expressed support for developing single-track trails and eventually extending the multi-use trail through the chalet area there in the western section of the park. So the master plan covers a lot of ground, and it captures a really broad community vision with a lot of diverse voices. And so where do we begin? This summer, our department will be working on rehabilitating the multi-use trail and replacing a bridge in the southwest section of the park. We'll also be working with community partners to add landscaping in the northwest gateway near that polar bear playground. Improving the safety of the sledding hill is another near-term priority, along with working with community partners to develop single-track trails that work with the natural environment and the existing soft surface trail system. Along with developing a wayfinding plan so that we can begin to upgrade signage and lighting and other amenities throughout the park and trail system. So with that, I'm happy to answer questions. We are eager for your support so that we can continue to invest in this important East Anchorage Park. Thank you.
Commissioner Krishna.
I'll kick us off. So I happen to live next to the park and use it often, and first of all, I want to say there are many things that I did actually learn from the master plan that I wasn't aware that we actually had in this park. But I suppose the first question I'll ask is if you could respond to the 2 resolutions that we had from the Northeast Community Council and speak to some of the suggestions and concerns that they voiced there.
Thanks, Commissioner Krishna. I also grew up near this park, and I learned a lot about all the facilities and natural resources here, so I learned a lot as well throughout the process. So to address these 2 resolutions, the first being regarding the more time needed to sort of get through the plan. We know it's a really long plan, and it covers a lot of ground. I will just kind of refer back to our record of public process. So the initial outreach for this plan began back in 2017, 2018, and that's when the community councils were first contacted and invited to participate, and an advisory group was formed. And although I'm a more recent addition to the Parks Department, I think that just reviewing all the actions that our department did take to reach out to the community and get people involved throughout the process, and at each stage of plan development to involve stakeholders, speaks to the strong process and involvement that we did have. And yeah, I will just also kind of reiterate that the plan has been posted online since October of 2021. Before the Parks and Recreation Commission hearing in January, that was about 2 or 3 months that the public had to kind of engage with the plan and read through it and get through it. And then, since January, there's been another couple of months for the public to give us their comments. So that speaks to the 2202. As far as access to North Rush and Jack Spring Park across Boniface Parkway, yeah, this is something that I spoke to in talking through these recommendations. Access is really, really important for this park, and we really support that. The reason there's a tunnel proposed included in the west section of the park connecting the north and south areas is first and foremost because it connects 2 sections of the park, rather than focus on sort of assets outside of our management. And when we did receive this comment, kind of around the time of the Parks and Rec Commission hearing, we went back through our survey responses, all of our comments, all of our meeting notes, and we just wanted to make sure we didn't miss something, that this tunnel proposed in the northeast corner of the park that would connect under Boniface to that neighboring area. It didn't really come up in the process based on our notes and records and the experience of the planners who were involved throughout the process. So we feel strongly that, we want to support promoting access to this park, and we would encourage the community councils to work with the appropriate agencies, whether that's DOT or AMATs, to get get that on their radar as a priority for the Northeast community.
Thank you.
Commissioner Polis.
So I guess I'll just ask the next question about that access. Is there a reason not to have that access in the master plan?
I think one reason, just based on the experience of our department with similar comments from communities when we do a park master plan, we've included that type of recommendation before for, a road or something that's not within our management, and we've received comments from the appropriate agency that we should take that out of the plan if it doesn't, meet their priorities or match what they're working on. So that's one reason to not include it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
I guess I'm just curious as a clarifying question then. I guess I'm understanding you to be saying that having a connection on the northeast side like that is kind of outside the scope of this plan. Is that a fair understanding?
I think it's outside the scope of our management, and it's not that we don't agree and don't support that access. We really do, have tried to address access throughout the plan.
Hi, Steve Rafuse, RAFUSC. I'm Superintendent of Parks. In the past, there's been 2 master plans that we've brought before the Planning and Zoning Commission. There's Taku Lake Park Master Plan, and then there was the Chauncey Muldoon Park Master Plan. And each of those had recommendations for actions in the right-of-way adjacent to the park. One was to vacate the right-of-way on DeBar next to Chauncey Muldoon Park, and another was for a new connection into Taku Lake Park, essentially a new driveway. So that was brought up through the master planning process. We included it in the plan, and on both occasions, DOT had submitted comments. Well, one was DOT, the other was the MOA traffic engineer, essentially saying that this is beyond the purview of the master plan, that they would like to ask the Planning and Zoning Commission to remove it from essentially the master plan, because it's outside the purview of that plan. And I think what the community is asking for is not unreasonable and the like. We're very challenged by access into the park from particularly north of DeBar on that Boniface side. So we fully support any actions that bring, essentially that make it, whether it's an overpass or a tunnel, anything that can improve access for residents and better connectivity, because I think some of the points and some of the comments that we heard throughout the plan and then after the fact have really spoken to the role of the park as not just for recreation, but for commuting, for all sorts of activity. It's so centrally located between Ship Creek, Glen Highway Trail, Chester Creek Trail, that getting access and getting folks into the park so they can connect to the larger system is important. So what we would do is we would obviously support those efforts in the future, but that is typically something that's going to fall under a DOT project in the future for Boniface, or even an AMATS nominated project that would bring non-motorized dollars, and then we can engage DOT and our partners in essentially bringing that access into the park.
Thank you for that. And then I guess I just have one additional follow-up with respect to the appendix that the Northeast Community Council submitted that had a pretty lengthy list of specific recommendations. Did you have did you have any comments or thoughts on any of those, and to what extent were those already kind of factored in earlier in the process, and to what extent are they newer?
So we did, look through each of these comments, and a couple we can touch on that are addressed in the plan includes some of the access, including the multi-use trail along the northern border of 6th Avenue. That is included in the plan to connect. There's a dead end there impeding some access. There's also a number of comments about kind of trail alignment and layout. So the Northeast Community Council has a Parks and Trails Committee. They requested to meet with our department and kind of discuss the project we have in the works for the summer, which is in the southwest corner of the park. There's a the multi-use trail's in need of rehabilitation. The bridge needs to be replaced. So we did actually spend a couple hours with them working through these recommendations, and we sat down with the project manager, Tanya Hickok. She's senior planner and engineer, so she could really speak to a lot of those and just make sure those comments were heard, and mostly they were about hierarchy and alignment and just promoting, safe flow of traffic throughout the area.
I would argue that a lot of the points, if you do give the plan a good thorough reading, a lot of the points are already included in the plan. And it just takes a little bit of time looking through the plan, and you can see that a lot of those items are in there. And then certain ones, as Nicolette, certain comments like realigning a junction at the bottom of a bridge and coming down from the chalet. As we go through the master plan, the part of the balance is identifying what your priorities are, but not getting into a full engineering document, and then we have 1,000 pages sitting in front of you of exactly what angle a trail is going to be in 10 years when we repave it. So a lot of those things, I think that we look at them and we realize, a lot of the trails within the park were, about 40 years old. So a lot of them are root damaged. A lot of them have angles which don't fall into the current design guidelines, which are essentially already established within the municipality. So for an example like the bridge at the bottom of the chalet, well, when we get to that section as we're moving through the park and repaving, we go out, we do a survey, we look at the design guidelines, and we realign trails to essentially make them work so that they're safe and that they flow and that they all are essentially not creating any issues. I guess, do you have any specific questions of the items that were brought up in the resolution that you'd like to see us address?
I don't have any specific questions. I was just curious for what your kind of general thoughts are on it, so thank you. Commissioner Bullis.
Just one more about the public comments that notices weren't sent out and all that. It's kind of hard to believe that based on you guys sending out 2,400 notices. That seems like a lot of notices, but do you just have any comment why like 2 or 3 people would at the last minute say they didn't get a notice about this project? Can you think of any area that maybe wasn't included? I mean, I know you're kind of given those addresses too, so just any comment on that, those last minute comments.
The planning department sends those out as part of this process, and I think 22,000 plus notices seems pretty comprehensive. Obviously, something could get lost in the mail. I can't really speak to that specifically. I know that even when we did our public meetings, we had sent thousands of notices out as well, which was early in the process before we had even our first workshop, just so that, in addition to, social media, hanging up posters, in grocery stores and throughout the park and reaching out to partners to get a wider reach, we did send those mailers out. So most folks who engage in the park, who are regularly at the park or live near the park should have had notice at least as far back as about 2018. And again, we had gone into this process knowing that we would need to be very thorough and very comprehensive and very proactive in communicating. And so from the get-go, we essentially outlined every step that we took, whether it's the emails to the assembly members in the area and to the state legislators so they can put those in their newsletters, to reaching out to the community councils, to just having robust social media. So, again, that's on page 115. You can see all the steps that we had taken, and even doing specific outreach, not just, broad outreach through the FCC and all community councils, but targeted outreach for the community councils, the 5 or 6 that were right within a mile of the park, just so we're making sure we're getting University Lakes, Scenic Foothills, Mountain View, Russian Jack Northeast, et cetera.
Thank you. Just wanted to ask.
Yeah.
Commissioner Krishna.
Thank you. I'll ask a question on sort of a different tack, which is in the public comments and some of the transcripts of or summaries of the meetings, there's definitely a tension between sort of preserving the natural forested areas in the park and then creating new recreation facilities and trails. I'm curious, I know this wasn't sort of addressed explicitly, but whether in the context of Anchorage parklands, whether there's a move towards more active recreation facilities or meeting the needs of various user groups versus sort of creating conservation areas or preserving the existing natural resources there. And I'm curious if you could speak to that a little bit, because I saw that reflected in some of the comments.
That's a good question. That's you.
Yeah, I think you've just kind of described all of Anchorage. I don't know. I think what makes it so important to, continue taking care of the facilities that are already in the park is that it's, as it is, even though it was developed, a while ago, it's, the use has changed, and there's more commuting, there's, we haven't had winter biking except in the more recent history. So the park, even without changing too much about it, it can support a lot of different types of use.
No, that's good. I think this is something, you do speak to something that is really like kind of where are we at in this moment in our history of our city, right? Like, where you have as the city has grown and population growth hasn't been so much over the last decade, but it's changed a lot. And a lot of folks who have lived in the city for 50 years have seen the parcels of land that they used to play in as kids have gotten developed. And so I think that was really a strong feeling with this process is, look, Russian Jack has been, as all of East Anchorage has grown up since the time it was a prison farm or an alcohol farm or rehabilitation area to being completely developed, and now East Anchorage is one of the most dense areas in the city, if not is the most dense area. I think that people were really holding on to, we're not going to just mow down Russian Jack and for all of the new ideas of today, and which might not be for tomorrow. And I think it gets back to, we heard that loud and clear from the start. We also heard that folks really just love what's already at the park, and then it just needs love. It just needs investment. We need to fix up the trails. We need to put some maps so people know where they're going. And so I think that gets that kind of attention, right? Like, so the idea of not cutting a single tree, sometimes that's not entirely realistic, but if the community is asking us on one hand, we need to essentially relocate how this trail interfaces at this intersection, that's going to come at the cost of some trees, right? It is the way it is because it was the least amount of trees, and it's not necessarily the safest intersection for that. So that is kind of an ongoing conversation that we have to be honest. Okay, we can, redevelop this intersection of the trail so that you have a larger radius and it's safer for travelers going through this area, but it's going to come at a cost. And so this is the constant tension that we're balancing here as managers of parkland is ensuring that we're talking about that, right? So we could just mow it down and put in a trail, but that's in no one's interest, and I don't think that that's anything that we have any desire to do. So I think that's a very interesting question. We could probably actually all talk about that for an hour after the meeting, but does that answer your question, Radhika? Does that get to what you're looking at?
Yes, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I don't see anything further pending. You've got 2 minutes and 12 seconds for rebuttal. And with that, we'll go ahead and open it up to the public. If there's anyone that wishes to speak to this matter, go ahead and come forward, and if you could state your name for the record and spell your last name before you start, and indicate if you're speaking as an individual or on behalf of an organization.
Okay.
You had it for,
There we go. Didn't push it hard enough the first time. My name is Kit Roberts, R-O-B-E-R-T-S, and I'm here representing the Northern Lights Model Railroading Club, which we are a tenant in the Russian Jack Park. We are currently in a caretaker's building. We have been on that facility for 40 years. We provide a public opportunity for people to come in and view our facilities, which is an operating model railroad in HO scale. We bring people into the park. We've been annually having open houses during Verandi weekends. We've had at times up to almost 500 people come through on the 2 weekends. Lately we've been averaging prior to COVID, or post or pre-COVID, about 250 to 300 people come through in the 2 weekends. We were also having First Friday open houses, inviting the public to come in. In a 2-hour period, our record was 75 people coming through in 2 hours, mostly families with young kids, grandparents bringing in their grandkids. The grandparents were there as kids, now bringing their grandkids in. So we've enjoyed being part of the parks. We've interacted with a number of the other user groups in there, being we're adjacent to the golf course. I've gotten to know several of those local regulars that come in and use the golf course. I feel that the master plan that we have here is a very acceptable plan. I think in my view of the different parks, this is Russian Jack Park has the largest multiple usage of user groups in this Anchorage. And so I feel that all the groups are well representative in the master plan, and I would like to see this plan go forward as it's written. I've attended the workshop sessions that they've had when the program started back in 2019, and so I was able to interact with other user groups and listen to their comments and concerns, and I feel that the comments that I know of that were made have been addressed in this plan. So as a group, we are in favor of this current master plan.
Thank you for your testimony. Sorry, you'll need to turn it on. There's a little mouth symbol there. You just touch lightly.
Okay. Stuart Grenier, S-T-U-A-R-T-G-R-E-N-I-E-R, Northeast Community Council Parks and Trails Chair. Chair Gardner, fellow volunteers, park staff, I'd just like to say I recognize it's a beautiful plan. They seem to listen to my comments, and I flipped through it. It was great, but as chair of the Northeast Community Council Parks and Trails Committee, I had to listen to the reaction to the plan at my committees. And that's why you guys have a very long motion in front of you. So this is the situation that I found myself in. The truth is our council has kind of neglected the area just east of Boniface for almost ever. We're basically a downtown Muldoon-centered council, and it's not been on our radar. Though we had many people involved in this plan that had NECC associated with their name, I think most of us, if not all of us, operated under special interest priority. Mine was the spring. I didn't want to see too many trails by the spring. Other people might have been baseball or fat bikes. Nobody thought about the folks east of Boniface, north of DeBar. And then we had a meeting at Russian Jack Chalet in January, and it came up. Where is the access for the folks north of DeBar and east of Boniface? And I said, well, where is the access? The tunnel from the Naka Valley to Russian Jack is really highly valued. I live on the other side of Muldoon Road. I love that tunnel. It's been a big thing for the Naka Valley and Cheney Lake area to get to Russian Jack. All of a sudden, now here we're facing the situation with mobile home parks and single-family residences on the other side of them, And I went door to door. I did 20 mobile homes, and then I sat down with the owner of Mayflower Circle Mobile Home Park. I contacted folks at Providence facility there, and I also put flyers on the doors for the private families east of the mobile home park. And nobody remembered being informed of a plan. And these folks, as you know, it's much easier to walk across Pine Street on the west side of the park than Boniface Parkway. These people weren't privy to any of the tree hotline posters that were put up to remind people to get involved. And guys, quite honestly, I was sitting in the mobile home park office with the owner, the managing owner, Donna Walker, and she showed me the flyer for this meeting. Guys, you know how many people live in that mobile home park? And you sent one flyer. So we said, okay, let's print it up. So she put it on a printer. I think you guys know what happens, right? You got that little black box behind all the contact information. So we printed up a bunch of prints. Nobody could contact you. Why do you put that black box? I mean, you know, this is a little bit of what the feeling they got with the Russian Jack plan. Though no fault of these guys, I think they played their cards firm and straight. But guys, I've sent flyers out before too through the mail, and I don't think they got delivered. So if you're going to contact the public and you choose the person who owns, you know, X number of mobile homes, who got informed? Well, anyhow, after saying that, I went through the process, and the council did not support this park plan because they were reacting to it. And when we went door to door, we got 25 signatures from the mobile home people who said they would like to have an overpass or an underpass through over Boniface connecting their area. I contacted the Providence Hospital Facility. They stonewalled me. I sent a letter to Providence Hospital Facility. It went all the way to the lower 48. I thought they were sisters that lived around here, but I guess not. They didn't contact us. And then when I went and contacted probably 30 flyers around the Ira Walker Park, I showed them a plan I threw together real quick where we were putting a bike trail between Mayflower Park and the Providence facility to tie Ira Walker in with Russian Jack uninterrupted trail. And then I got another surprise. And that was, those guys didn't like the access, crime, drugs, and things like that. So that's where we're at. So I know I'm out of time, but I would hope somebody would ask a question just to hear it again. Why is it okay to put a new tunnel under the bar for Parks and Rec, but it's not okay to try to include the highest densely populated neighborhood around with an overpass? That's kind of where we're at, but any questions would be appreciated.
Commissioner Ron.
Thank you, through the chair. Mr. Grenier, I think you were starting to talk about potential conflicting feedback, people who were in support and in opposition. Would you mind expanding on that just a little bit, perhaps continuing your thoughts therein?
Oh, very good. Thank you. Well, I put probably 30 flyers on the private single-family residence. They would have been connected. You know, we had to float a plan. This is, remember, when from the community councils, we see a bigger picture right away. It's not just a plan. And one of the cards that's in my deck was we had Representative Ivy Sponholz come to the council 4 months ago and tell us we got a big wad of federal money coming our way. And you need to have a plan with public support. Well, after watching Steve at the Parks and Rec Commission meeting talk about why there wasn't you know, an overpass, but there's one new one coming under the bar, I said, well, there it is. So we managed to get 25 signatures with phone numbers, not a formal petition, with people who lived in the trailer park, and the owners of the trailer park, or the managing owner, was very receptive. Obviously, something like that would really increase property value. But when I went to the door-to-door, people were very positive. And then we called our second meeting, which was at Ira Walker Park, to get that neighborhood involved. Well, it was cold, covered with snow, no parking. 6 people showed. 4 were residents. And one said, I'm interested. I think it would be great. We could take our bikes all the way to Kincaid Park. But then the other 2 showed up, and they pointed to tennis shoes hanging from a telephone line. And he goes, you know what that means? And I go, well, someone threw some tennis shoes on a telephone line. He goes, no, that's illegal drug sale place. And then he talked about the homelessness they've had in Ira Walker Park and how if there's connectors, it's going to cause problems. They're going to be going by people's houses. And so it turned out to be a negative experience. So 3 out of the 4 people who showed up, were against it. But guys, look what we're doing now. I mean, the homeless shelters are closing. It's all over the news. So that's what happened there. Who gets involved? Property owners are way more likely to get involved, as we all know. But to not even include the mobile home residents. So this is it has all kind of boiled over at once. As someone who's been on the council for a long time, that some folks just don't seem to be getting the full information at times, and whether they're actually going to get involved. I called all 25 of those people. It was cold. Not one of them came to the meeting. I don't know if they didn't understand that it might have been important or not, or whatever, but these things start slowly. And so I have to report honestly, that's what I found. So, but as far as including things in the plan, it's all there in the appendix. Will the council ever support the plan? Well, does it matter? We want a splash. We want to draw attention to our needs, and that's why I'm in front of you now. I think I'm doing my job. And if we're using the plan and this body as a sounding board, well, maybe I'll feel better if I do it. If I don't do it, I'm going to feel like I've neglected, the shadow side of the Northeast Community Council, the largest community council in Anchorage. So I'm trying to stand up for my community by doing that.
Commissioner Spinelli.
Yeah, so aside from not getting individual mailers out to the mobile home park, is the Northeast connection really the only opposition or lack of on calling out a future Northeast connection? Is that really the only problem with the plan? That in your eyes or the council's eyes?
Okay, you have an appendix that came with that motion. Somebody took a lot of time to put that together. It wasn't me. All right, there's how many points, how many pages? Once again, guys, as a community council, we have to try to get our constituents' voices heard. That adding of an appendix to that motion, I thought was an act of genius. It never occurred to me. But is it going to get heard at Parks and Rec? Well, someone read it. But, what actually makes it into notes at meetings? It's not always everything, guys. But that's the main one. Of course, I can tell you from the meeting what I remember is there was lots of people that don't like parking lots. They think people should walk to the park, that kind of attitude. And of course, we have distinguished tree-loving people. You guys know who we're talking about. They're everywhere. And of course, they come. So that's, who we're dealing with. They're great people. But I find myself here, and that's what I can say about that. Thank you for the question.
I'm just curious to make sure I caught, with respect to the mailings to the mobile home park, was your understanding when you were saying that there was one flyer or one mailing that went to the manager's office, or is that?
I'm talking about this body's mailing, the purple sheet. Now, I'm not talking about their mailings, but I don't believe that every trailer received a mailing. And even if they did, I don't know if they understood that potentially it meant that they could get direct access to the park. You know, I did some door-to-door there. I was out there at night in March, and I could see the skiers moving on the trail in behind the trailers on the other side of the road. And I thought, wow, you know, have these people even been in the park? I mean, I wouldn't let my kid go near Boniface Parkway. And then the sidewalk, have you seen that sidewalk on the east side? Very narrow, non-existent in the winter. Okay, so you're going to walk to one of these corners and push a button? Yeah, guys, it's not on their radar. And so, but I would like to thank, you know, the owner of the park was very receptive, and we worked together to get people informed. But yes, your flyer, you know, that block, take a look at that block. That little gray box has a purpose. It's to prevent it from being duplicated and informing more people. Because once you copy it, you can't read what's written behind the gray box.
Okay, I appreciate that clarification. Thank you. Okay, thank you for your testimony. I don't see any further questions pending.
Okay, thank you. Oops, I dropped my-
Anyone else wishing to speak to this matter? Okay, we have one person who will be testifying by phone. We'll go ahead and call them now.
Welcome to the voicemail of Welcome to the voicemail of
No further public testimony.
I don't see anyone else here either looking to testify further. So yeah, you have 2 minutes and 12 seconds for rebuttal.
I want to thank Kit and Stu for those comments, and that's awesome about the Model Railroad Club. I really hope that the recommendations included in the plan can work to accommodate all the users they get and all the events they're hosting. Speaking to the Northeast Community Council's comments, I really commend Stu and his leadership in getting more feedback and engaging more people. I just want to address a couple of things. He mentioned kind of how valuable the Nunaka Valley Tunnel is, and just want to reiterate that one of the first priorities of this plan is to improve the existing multi-use trail system, and that includes making improvements in the tunnels, safety and lighting, and other safety improvements. Stu mentioned some concerns about misuse of the park and kind of just the flow of traffic through the park. And I think that it's evident in the recommendations that bringing more visibility and just taking better care of the existing facilities in the park will hopefully start working to address some of the safety concerns that are seen in the area. He also spoke to kind of the conflicting views we often are working with about, development, parking lots versus protecting natural resources. And I think in this plan, where we've decided to add or recommended adding parking, like in the Northeast Gateway, that area is currently really kind of shuttered on the Boniface side because there's no parking, there's no access, there's a locked gate. So I think that this plan really does try to address just improving access and making the park more visible and open for all. So I think that's all I have to say. Thank you.
I guess I have one question. I'm curious if you or maybe Steve knows historically how the Nanaca Valley Tunnel came about and when that was developed and kind of what the process was for that. Sorry, we've got a commissioner on the phone. I know up and down is tiring, but...
Apologies. Yeah, so based on the development of the tunnel, the design, compared to something like the tunnel that goes underneath DeBar, which is real narrow, real small, and that one's significantly wider, it would be much newer. Probably, I would say from probably 1980, 1990s on. So it's definitely a newer tunnel. And not as old as, I think that first tunnel was developed back in the, 70s, early 80s. And I can look back at the notes to look at the development timeline in the plan.
Okay, and I guess I haven't looked at the current or old plan, but I would assume that tunnel is not referenced in the prior plan for the park.
Let's see. I can look here. We can come back to that question, maybe?
Sure, that's fine. Thank you. Commissioner Ron.
Thank you to the chair. Perhaps Ms. Dent, you can answer this question while the other is being searched for. My interest is around administrative process and what happens if the commission doesn't move forward with approval of this plan. How might that impact progress at the park with respect to the master plan? Is there any funding that may be delayed or anything of that sort?
Yeah, I think that is one consequence that could come of it. We have a lot of community partners like Alaska Trails who are actively seeking funding and grants to make some of these improvements happen. I think the community is really, really eager to see some of these assets get improved, like the multi-use trail. The Northeast Community Council has submitted a resolution in the past specifically addressing the portion of trail we're looking at rehabilitating this summer and replacing the slippery bridge. So I think, yeah, any delay is just could interrupt with really needed improvements that of assets that are really well used for commuting, recreation, and all of the above.
And just to answer that question, looking back at the development history and some of the aerial imagery, it looks like sometime towards before 1990, but after 1980, it looks like that tunnel was put in.
And is it referenced in the prior version of the plan?
Are you referring specifically to another tunnel in the north half of the park, or just the one that already exists?
The Nanaca Valley Tunnel,
Nanaca
specifically.
Proposed in 79.
Looks like the 1979 says proposed underpass to Nunaca Valley. And then by the 2002 plan, it's updated to the existing.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I don't see any current pending questions, so thank you. We'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Commissioner Krishna.
Sure, I'll kick us off. In the matter of case 2022-0032, I will make a motion to approve the park master plan for Russian Jack Springs Park.
Seconded by Commissioner Winchester. Commissioner Krishna, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes, I would. Thank you. I think we heard public testimony speaking to the many sort of various interest groups involved in this process. I think I would like to note that there was significant public involvement over many years, including 2,000 online comments and 100 people engaged through public events, in addition to an advisory group and stakeholder outreach. I think as a regional park, balancing the needs of most of East Anchorage, if not the whole city, was obviously a years-long challenge, but I think that the park plan we have in front of us addresses many of those concerns and sets out a plan to build on the recreation that Russian Jack Springs Park offers to East Anchorage. And for those reasons, I intend to support the motion.
Commissioner Winchester.
Yeah, before coming on the Planning and Zoning Commission, I was on the Parks and Rec Commission for a number of years. I've seen that group do very good work in many parts of Anchorage. I think we've seen parts of this concept plan come while I was on the commission, maybe a draft plan. I know the group takes it very seriously to incorporate users' concerns when they develop these kind of things. The appendix that was referenced, I think a lot of those comments, like Steve, you mentioned, are going to be addressed as you get into the specifics of build-outs of different projects. So I think you're going to take those that appendix of concerns from the Northeast Community Council into consideration as you flesh this out, and I applaud the work that you've done so far, and I plan to support it.
Commissioner Ron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the comments of fellow commissioners thus far, and they weigh significantly on how I'm currently thinking about this. I've been quite interested in the comments provided by the Northeast Community Council around access in that northeast quadrant, and I started out being less than impressed, I think, with the way in which I felt that concern was being addressed. We heard from the petitioner that, to paraphrase, it's outside the park boundaries, so we just, the master plan is not the appropriate place to do so. And my initial response to that is it just continues the barrier that literally, physically exists in not enabling, I'll call it equitable access, right? And I think the Community Council's comments spoke very clearly to that point. And I'm a proponent of this park and want to see everyone be able to enjoy it in a safe way and access it in a safe way. So I'm left wondering, is there an additional action that we could provide guidance to the Parks Department, Planning Department to look further into that, to open up funding or evaluation study or agreement with the other agencies necessary to get some traction and move forward on looking at that component. That is my hesitation in not fully approving the master plan at this point, but otherwise I would approve.
I guess I'll ask a question. I'm curious for staff what your, I guess, understanding or thought with respect to including something like that in the plan. Not, I guess, to clarify my question. I was on the commission when we saw the Taku master site plan, and I sadly, to admit, don't recall the specific comments from DOT about not wanting to have that particular portion included in the plan, but I recognize the point. For me, it's with that in mind, it's disconcerting to hear that this proposed underpass for Nanaka Valley, or the current underpass, was proposed originally in one of the plans for this park. And if we're not going to have it in this plan, do you have any thoughts or comments or suggestions as to like a proposed mechanism for the community council or other people to pursue to try to promote a project like that?
Thank you. Through the chair, an option would be to add an advisory note. So the planning department is recommending approval of this plan, but you could add an advisory note that you're in support of a connection along the northeast quadrant of the park. Adding it as a condition of approval could hamper the ability for this to get passed, because if you put a condition of approval on something that Parks and Recreation does not have purview of obtaining additional right-of-way and having to get DOT or the Municipal Traffic Engineering Department approval of, could be an obstacle. So I think adding an advisory note that you're in support of that and understand that that is one of the community council's main concerns, that might be an option.
Commissioner Polis.
I just want to kind of second Commissioner Ron's comments there. You know, I think the plan's great. I'm not a super runner, a super biker, or any of that stuff, but I know how important Russian Jack's Park is. The one thing I almost just wish it was in there was just a statement that, you know, provide future planning for the access, anything like that. Just a statement in there I would have no issues with this whatsoever. But I do struggle with just, we didn't even mention the corridor in the plan really. And I think that'd be a good starting point to chase that stuff down if it was mentioned in there. Other than that, I think it's a great plan. I'm going to say that.
Commissioner Krishna.
Thank you. I fully agree, I think, with Commissioner Ron, Commissioner Polis's comments. And honestly, while I was reading this plan, that was foremost in my mind because I'm a commuter through the park. I use it to access bike boulevards and other Chester Creek and other areas around the park. I understand, though, the need to have a park plan that the department can pursue funding for in a reasonable way within their purview. So I would urge us to think about that. I would be supportive of an advisory comment, but I would be more comfortable having it phrased as a holistic look at access. I'm not quite sure whether this particular proposed underpass is in the appropriate location. I would encourage us to remember that Boniface doesn't have pedestrian facilities along most of the road, and I think we've all seen pedestrians in the roadway on that street. And so I think there's a need to look more holistically at park access on the north and on the northeast of the park. But I'm not comfortable necessarily recommending a particular location and would leave that to the discretion of the department.
Ms. Gettig, I see you in the queue.
Thank you. Through the chair, I did just want to clarify that the park master plan is a guiding document for 20 years. It's kind of a 20,000 foot view over the possibilities and the direction of the park, and opens up the conversation for improvement areas. So I do just want to clarify that this is in some cases, when you see park plans come before you, or park projects, they are major site plan reviews for the park, and that might be the more appropriate place to require a connection at a certain juncture. And that, again, typically, like Commissioner Winchester mentioned, these don't include engineered drawings and exact plans for the reason that they have to get the funding to do the smaller projects, and then they get dived into a little bit deeper.
Commissioner Spinelli.
Yeah, I intend to support the motion. I'm willing to support it as is or with amendments. I would like to point out there is a note, and maybe this would be a question for park staff. On page 84 regarding the Northwest Gateway, there's a note about working with other agencies to ensure that future upgrades to Pine Street include safe bike and pedestrian facilities. But I noticed on the northeast one, it doesn't have a note like that, and that seems to be one of the major issues. Is there a reason that a similar note wouldn't be added for all areas? I mean, I'm thinking that, generally speaking, that the park would be open to that everywhere, but...
Yeah, you can go ahead and come up and share your thoughts. Thank you.
So I appreciate that point. That was, essentially, that was articulated throughout the process. And actually, since we started the process, there have been upgrades along Pine Street to put in bike lanes and then to actually have some mid-block crossings. I don't see why the same approach shouldn't apply to Boniface. I think the challenges are a lot bigger than compared to Pine Street, where you have a 2-lane road there. And in terms of just, so adding just sort of a little bit of information about how we might work with other agencies, at least as it relates to the Boniface side, is there's the capital improvement program, which starts at the community council level. So after the Boniface access was brought up, we went back and looked at the capital improvement list essentially from the community council to see if that was identified and we had missed something in the past. That's one approach. That gets essentially that project into the municipality's hands, and that helps the municipality essentially look at where they're going to put investments, and also through the AMATS program, through non-motorized transportation. Those are probably your two best mechanisms for putting some sort of better access, whether it's a tunnel or bridge, over from that side of the road. In that neighborhood specifically. So those are two mechanisms. I've talked to Stu a little bit about that, but those would be the two best routes to go, plus keeping an eye on what the $1 trillion of infrastructure funding is going to bring and how we as a city and as a state, it's a DOT, Boniface would be DOT, and then Pine Street's actually a municipality, I believe. So then keeping an eye on that and making sure that that's in the work program. And that would happen through the community council, likely communicating with Willikowski's office. That was a lot more than you asked, sorry. Thought I'd touch on some points.
Yeah, thank you. I guess one more quick follow-up on the subject of the northeast section of the park, specifically the east border, north half. It's mainly large tracts of privately owned land, I guess. Have any of the owners of those land indicated the willingness to give up land to accommodate the tunnels or bridge connections that we were throwing around here? East of the
East of Boniface?
Yeah.
That is, as I take a look at it, like, okay, how would we put this into practice? I think there's two big challenges there. One, there is a pretty tight development density right there, so some sort of future redevelopment would have to happen in order to accommodate it on the east side of the road. Plus you have some really challenging topography on the Boniface side, essentially from DeBar, then you start going uphill. You probably have about 40, 50 feet in elevation, which might actually make something like a flyway over more feasible than a tunnel. And then by the time you get to, if you're just looking at the picture on page 80, of the plan 84, where the northwest gateway is, then you start to get more level right about where that parking lot is. Were you asking about the east? I'm sorry, the northeast and northwest?
I'm asking about the connections east of Boniface, like anywhere in there. That seemed to be what I was.
The east, yeah.
Finding.
It would be challenging. There would have to be several things all happening. The funding would have to line up, one, that would be a big thing, and then some sort of redevelopment would likely have to happen of the property across the way.
I was kind of tracking along Commissioner Ron's comments that like if you don't show a line that says future connection here, then you might not ever get one. But then looking at the maps, I'm thinking maybe that's why you don't have one, because there is not really a clear place that made sense to me. So that's all I had.
Commissioner Polis.
I think I'll just kind of finish full circle on all that. There's no way we're going to know how much this is going to cost, where it's going to go. I know DOT is not going to be happy about, talking about underpasses and overpasses and all that. The only comment I'm making is that just mentioning access should be improved to that corner of the park is really all I'm thinking a bullet point to just start the conversation and get it in the master plan. And that's really, there's no way we're going to figure out where this thing goes. It's just the point that the access should be improved someday. A mention of it might help everything we're discussing. I'll leave it at that.
Commissioner Krishna.
I hope this is a final question about this, but is the department's intent that 6th Avenue pathway multi-use creates a sort of a trail access for only the neighborhood north, or that it could connect further along to the east, or that there might be some bicycle connections or some other connections there that speak to the conversation we're having?
I've got Ms. Gettig in the queue, and then if there's further comments that may be helpful, you can speak. Thank you.
Thanks.
Sorry, we've got, I don't know. Did you have something you wanted to say, Ms. Gettig?
Through the chair, it might not be a response to Commissioner Krishna, so Nicolette has the floor.
Sure, thank you.
I think if you look further into the Northeast Gateway concept, that kind of just the high-level recommendations are to promote trail connectivity in that area. So from that 6th Avenue pathway, that could be a connection. And I think just to note, it's not a signaled crosswalk at this time. So.
Commissioner Ron.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, maybe seek your direction here. Would like to focus something back at the petitioner to seek their input on what we're talking about or around. I'm unclear what the best mechanism is. Is it a study? Is it a plan? What is it? If appropriate, I'd like to get their input just on that matter.
I think that is fine, although I see Ms. Gettig in the queue again. I don't know if your comment relates to Mr. Ron's question or Commissioner Ron's question.
Yeah, through the chair. I might add the suggestion if the board is wanting to recommend approval of the plan subject to addressing this concern, you could add a recommendation to add on page 59 of the staff report, 84 of the plan itself, the wording of work with other agencies to ensure future upgrades to Boniface to include safe bike and pedestrian facilities under the recommendation for the Northeast Gateway on page 88 of the document. So that might be an avenue to add the recommendation to address the concerns with pedestrian access across Boniface Parkway without dictating the exact location and mechanism.
So just for clarity, what you're proposing is adding a similar bullet point as you find on page 84 for the Northwest that refers to working with other agencies to ensure that future upgrades to Pine Street include safe bike and pedestrian facilities, and have an equivalent bullet for the Northeast Gateway on page 88 of the plan that references Boniface instead of Pine Street. Did I capture that correctly?
That is correct, if that's amenable to Parks Department, just a recommendation of how that could be included in your approval.
Okay, thank you. And I guess if the Parks Department has any thoughts or response to a recommendation like that?
I think that recommendation makes sense. I think it's essentially just coordinate, make sure any upgrades are taking these things into account.
Thank you. So we still have our original motion pending. I think we would need a motion to amend to include that additional recommendation. Or if there's no motion pending, we can just go ahead and call a vote on what we have at the moment. Commissioner Ron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Filling the void, hopefully, while Commissioner Pullis pulls it together, because unfortunately, though I want to see this amended, I missed the what goes where. So if somebody else could step up.
Thank you, Commissioner Ron. I think we might have some assistance shortly with respect to a proposed amendment. And I guess I can just say my understanding would be of the discussion or the recommendation from staff would be just to have a bullet as found on page 59 of the staff packet, where for the Northwest Gateway, it has the third bullet about working with other agencies. It would be to have a similar bullet on page 61 of the staff packet, page 88 of the draft plan, and instead of referencing Pine Street, it would reference Boniface.
That is correct.
I think we're shortly to have some assistance with proposed language. I recognize the challenge because there are two different page numbers on this. Okay, Commissioner Pullis. So if you're looking at page 61 of the staff packet, it has both pages 88 and page 89 of the draft plan. No, we've got a motion by Commissioner Spinelli.
Yes, I would like to make a motion that we amend page 61, the section of the Northeast Gateway, and we add the bullet point from staff packet page 59 from the Northwest Gateway that says, work with other agencies to ensure that future upgrades to Boniface Street include safe bike and pedestrian facilities.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Spinelli. That motion is seconded by Commissioner Pulis, and to be clear, this is a motion to amend the main motion to include that additional bullet point with our recommendation. Commissioner Spinelli, you can speak to your motion if you'd like, although I think we've already gone round and round, so we'll go ahead and call the vote.
Mr. Strike?
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes. That leaves the main motion still pending before us. I don't see any other further comments pending, so we'll go ahead and call the vote for the main motion.
Commissioner Strike?
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes as well. Thank you, everyone, for helping work through that. Next case on the agenda is 2022-0042. These are the review and recommendation of an ordinance amending AMC subsection 2109 OC2 with respect to accessory dwelling units within the Girdwood Valley. Can we hear a presentation from staff?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. In 2018, the Planning Department oversaw a text amendment of the accessory dwelling unit, commonly referred to as ADU, land use regulations within Anchorage Municipal Code Title 21 as proposed by the organization Live, Work, Play. That was through Assembly Ordinance 2018-43S as amended. This ordinance only affected the ADU regulations within the Anchorage Bowl, but there was an intention to further amendments to the ADU regulations for the surrounding communities at a later date. To expedite amendments to the ADU regulations for Girdwood and ensure they are aligned with the priorities of the community, the Girdwood Board of Supervisors and corresponding Land Use Committee have independently prepared the proposed amendments to Anchorage Municipal Code Title 21, Chapter 9, subsection 050C2, Use-Specific Standards for Accessory Uses. These amendments are intended to bring the ADU regulations for Girdwood in line with those of the Anchorage Bowl while ensuring protections and design standards specific to Girdwood. The Planning Department has reviewed the proposed amendments and generally agrees with their intent, scope, and purpose. It is important to note that the purpose of ADU standards within Girdwood are to establish unique regulations specific to the community. The ADU regulations of the Anchorage Bowl prevail unless they conflict with the unique standards of Girdwood. Because of this, many of the recommended amendments below are to remove code redundancy and preserve continuity. And just to clarify, to make it easier for the Commission to read exactly what the proposed amendments are, please note that the language being deleted is capitalized and within brackets. Language being added is underlined. And then the language that is being further amended per department recommendations is shown in bold. And I can fairly quickly run through the department's proposed amendments, starting with subsection A on page 2 of the staff packet. We would recommend that we remove the proposed language good quality housing and replace that with supplemental. Good quality just has a subjective nature to it, and adding supplemental gets more to the root intent of the ordinance and adding additional housing stock. And also eliminating the language for smaller households, because it just sort of infers that only smaller households can make use of these regulations, but larger households or larger lots also do qualify for this. And then subsection D here, we'd just like to add the word qualifying non-conforming accessory structures, just to further clarify that it's not necessarily any non-conforming accessory structure being brought into compliance, it's those that would qualify for that status. And then in subsection I, just removing the language except that only a land use permit is required. That just appeared redundant to us in our review, and that we'd just like to remove any redundant language if necessary. Then subsection B3 under location, we're just adding a note to the revisor. There's a graphic that's underneath that section that we'd also like to remove since it won't be relevant to the per the amendments that are proposed. Subsection C, we're just recommending a language change from nor to or, just to make it consistent with code language as it is in other sections of code. And then in subsection E, just clarifying the apostrophe there, that would be feet. Subsection F6, just clarifying that no more than 2 parking spaces shall be provided, and that's because it's limited, or ADUs are limited to no more than 2 bedrooms. So functionally, you're never going to have more than 2 parking spaces. And then further in subsection J on page 4, just sort of clarifying the side and rear setback flexibility allowed in the dimensional standards table, rather than pointing to a specific note. Really, we could go either way on this, but we just felt that it read a little better, sticking with allowed in and then getting rid of note to of. And then further in subsection 4, Roman numeral 4, just again getting rid of the reference to that a land use permit is required. And then lastly, on page 5, we're just proposing to remove the variances may be granted to the standards and provisions of this subsection. Previous ordinance that was referred to as the Title 21 Omnibus Ordinance removed the prohibition for variances for ADUs. So that would apply to Chapter 9, and any ADU that did not meet the dimensional standards or use-specific standards, and they felt that they had a justifying reason for it, that homeowner or developer would be able to apply for a variance. And we just didn't see a need to necessarily clarify that, given that they have that ability in current code. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the commission may have. Thank you.
Commissioner Krishna.
Sure. I didn't see mention of public comments. Could you just clarify if public notice was sent out and any comments received from the public?
So through the chair, because this is an ordinance, we don't really have a mailing list to send it to because we don't have a specific petition site that we can then draw a radius around. So when it comes to the noticing requirements per Title 21 for any Title 21 amendments, those go to the applicable community council and then they get published on the municipal website, and both of those things have been done.
And I take it that no comments were received, apart from agencies, from the Girdwood Board of Supervisors or anyone in the community?
Through the chair, that's correct. We have not received any public comments.
If I may ask a follow-up question, just one clarification. Could you tell us if there are any places in which this proposed ordinance differs from the relevant ordinance for the Anchorage Bowl?
Through the chair, I can. I certainly can do that. So there is quite a bit of overlap. However, the purpose and intent statements do vary. They're more specific to Girdwood. There are several sections that do overlap with Chapter 5. Maximum number of accessory units, the location criteria, the size criteria is very similar to the Anchorage Bowl. One thing that's unique to Girdwood is the floor area ratio, the density. The maximum height, I believe, is also within Chapter 5 and is very similar to that. The parking requirement is similar. However, the difference being in Girdwood, they have the 600 square feet or less requirement for one parking space, and then 2 if it's larger than 600 square feet. The ADU having no more than 2 bedrooms is the same as in Chapter 5. And the utility requirements are the same or very similar in Chapter 5. And then, of course, in the expiration or approval of an ADU, that points back to Chapter 5 as well as the transfer. And then the language for prior illegal use, shown on page 4, subsection Roman numeral 6, is identical to Chapter 5 as well. Were there any specific sections of this AO, Commissioner Krishna, that you were curious about and how it tied to Chapter 5, or was the response sufficient?
Yes, thank you for the overview.
Commissioner Ron.
Thank you. Through the chair, Mr. Yella, I'm interested in the draft ordinance language on page 9 of the staff packet. Middle paragraph, the whereas, starting on line 23, states, whereas there are a large number of existing non-conforming accessory structures within Girdwood, and there are benefits to both property owners and government by bringing residential accessory structures into compliance. Can you speak to that with respect to the practical effect of if the commission passes this ADU language? Will something be happening perhaps to existing structures?
So through the chair, Commissioner Ron, so if you had a accessory dwelling unit that, say, didn't meet the current size requirements, or it was over height, or say it encroached in a side yard setback, something like that. But through this ordinance, the regulations changed, and now there's no longer a violation on the property as a result of this amendment. There's a couple different things that could happen. One, it just becomes conforming, or 2, if it was developed at a time before applicable zoning regulations took place, then there's always the possibility that it could be deemed legally non-conforming, and goes through its own research process to determine that, an application process. But I believe the applicant or representative of the applicant is here this evening and may be able to sort of give some more thoughts on exactly what broader context that the community feels that might have. Because certainly I wish I had it, but I don't have a specific breakdown as to how many of these facilities exist in Girdwood and exactly what the end results of how many of those are going to be brought into compliance. Although I do wish I did have that information for you this evening.
Okay, thank you. So is there, I guess, an applicant or anyone additional speaking on behalf of it?
Good evening, Chair Gardner and fellow commissioners. My name is Mike Edgington. That's Edgington. I'm co-chair of Girdwood Board of Supervisors. Tonight I'll be speaking to this particular ordinance, and when relevant, I'll be referring to discussions and decisions made by Girdwood Board of Supervisors.
Thank you. Sorry, before you get too far into it, can you just try and have the mic a little closer to your mouth to make sure that it's caught by the commissioner who's on the phone?
Sure.
Thank you.
It's a difficult thing I'm getting used to glasses. One point which I don't think was covered in the staff presentation, there was a resolution by GBOS in favor of the language here in the application from July last year. It went through our public process. This particular proposal was discussed over the course of a couple of years. So I'm just going to briefly make some general comments. So a number of years ago, we started working on a comprehensive plan update, and it was very obvious that housing is one of the major issues that impacts Girdwood at the moment. Most of the issues, the larger issues about housing, we think will be addressed through comprehensive plan update and then the associated subsequent actions to Title 21, Chapter 9. We did, however, identify a couple of things that we thought would be relatively easy to address in a faster time scale than that, and ADUs was one of those. So the code we have in place in Chapter 9 is much older than the code in Chapter 5. So what the Housing Working Group did was look at the language in Chapter 5, the language in Chapter 9, and basically went through that and said, are there any particular conditions in Girdwood that mean we shouldn't adopt the sort of more permissive regulations of Chapter 5? Or are there any specific concerns in Girdwood that should have different language in there? And we had a couple of use cases we were considering. One of them is the language in the current language, the language which will be replaced in Chapter 9, has a very hard restriction on when you can have detached ADUs versus attached ADUs. It's a lot size limit. So one of the principles we followed was, where possible, site design should determine what's reasonable, what isn't reasonable, rather than sort of hard and fast numbers on lot limits. So about 15%, under current regulations, about 15% of the lots in Girdwood could have a detached ADU, and the rest obviously can't. We removed the lot line limit, or the lot size limit, in the proposed changes here. The other main changes were to increase the maximum size, to remove the minimum size, to be a bit clearer on parking requirements, and to also remove the requirements on architectural compatibility. The argument there is that Girdwood is pretty eclectic when it comes to architecture, and having this sort of, in fact we have specific code in Chapter 9 that prevents certain types of overly consistent design, like in mirror duplexes are prohibited, for example. So we took out those restrictions. There's also a lot of language, a reasonable amount of language in our older code which addressed bed and breakfasts. There's a much bigger issue going on in Girdwood and resort communities across the country about short-term rentals rather than bed and breakfast language. So that bed and breakfast language was, I would say, somewhat anachronistic really for the realities on the ground now. We also looked at the proposed ADU changes in other communities, and there were several things which are recommended for best practice, which we either adopted or in some cases we did not adopt. One of those was the issue around owner-occupiers. Again, because we have this issue with short-term rentals in Girdwood, that whole area probably needs to be addressed in a more comprehensive way and not directly through the ADU regulations. So the owner-occupation is maintained. The other thing I would point out that is slightly different between the proposed chapter or the proposed modifications here in the code in Anchorage Bowl is there is an issue in there's an option in Girdwood of moving building sort of 5 feet to the left and right with side setbacks, and there is a specific limitation. You can't have maximum height 35-foot structures if you're making use of that flexibility. So that's just a technical change between the Chapter 9, our proposed regulations, and the Chapter 5 regulations elsewhere. What else was I going to cover? No, I think that's it. Yeah, all the recommended changes to language from planning all are completely reasonable. I think they improve clarity. They don't change the purpose or intent or effect of anything we proposed, discussed, and passed beforehand. Thank you.
Thank you. I see only one person out there. I don't know if you're looking to testify to this. Okay, you're welcome to come forward. And if you could state your name and for the record before you begin.
Hi, and thank you for hearing from me. My name is Jennifer Wingard. The last name is Wingard. I'm also a member of Girdwood Board of Supervisors, but I am here as an individual.
Can you pull the mic down just slightly?
Yes,
Thank you.
sorry, height challenged. I'm also an active community member on a whole number of different committees, and I just kind of wanted to offer a devil's advocate point of view on this. I am probably more than most other people involved in this process, very in the middle of this as a landlord in both Girdwood and Anchorage. And one of the things that concerned me about this process was the absence of the voice of people directly involved, particularly landlords and also tenants. So throughout the whole course of housing working groups discussions about this, there was no discussion about economic realities at any point. And I have combed through the minutes. There was also no presentation ever from local landlords about our realities, and particularly why some people are choosing short-term rentals over long-term rentals. It is not just because of the availability of being able to do that. There is increasing financial pressures on being long-term renters and an increasing disconnect between what our renters in Girdwood can afford and what actual housing costs are, even bare minimum, even with free land. That is something that some people could want to argue one way or another, but I was particularly struck by the recent article about Block 96 in downtown Anchorage. That is a great example of what community involvement is required to get, and what kind of muni input and commitment, financial commitment, is required in order to get rents down to $1,500 for an efficiency to $1,800 for a one-bedroom, and those are way above what Girdwood renters can pay, way above. So with that kind of subsidy, the numbers don't work. That means that this whole idea behind why we're increasing density in Girdwood has not had any financial proof. It doesn't have any financial proof to it at all. I have asked for 3 years to see the numbers on this. Could somebody please show me how anybody could build an ADU and rent it at what our renters can afford? And I keep getting these stories about, oh, you take the upper tier out and it'll help the lower tier, but that's not really the way our market works. And I feel like I have a good view of this because I also rent in Anchorage. And the market I rent to in Anchorage is completely different. I have locum tenens, I have IT people, I have people working short-term contracts, I have plenty of people who can afford apartments that can go for much more here than the same apartment could go for in Girdwood, even though the overhead is significantly higher in Girdwood between paying for the inevitable rot issues and the inevitable higher costs for anybody to come down. We pay windshield time, and it is very often even more than what the cost is. So I want to offer that if we are going to increase density in Girdwood, and I don't think Girdwood really feels like we need more parking lots and fewer trees, but if we are going to increase density in Girdwood, we should do it for a good reason, and this would be a good reason if it was valid, but I haven't seen any single proof that it is.
Thank you. Okay, and Mr. Edgerton, you have a few minutes for rebuttal if there's anything further you'd like to add.
Thank you. I don't think it'll be a rebuttal per se. I think I'd just like to say that Jennifer and I have had many spirited arguments on this topic, and I agree with that we have very, very difficult market conditions, and this is not a silver bullet to solve our housing problem by any means. It probably is not a silver bullet. But what we have to do in terms of general housing is look at a much more comprehensive set of solutions. This is, so there's nothing radical in this. It's basically enabling, removing some of the restrictions we have that are good with, just in the good with Chapter 9 code, and bringing it up to sort of more compatible code with the rest of Anchorage and with many other communities, including resort communities. But there has not been any pro formas or very detailed analyses on particular sites or anything like that. The data we do have shows that we anecdotally got testimony in our land use committee from people who were looking to build a garage with a unit above, but their lot size was slightly too small and just below the thresholds in code, so they weren't able to do that. But again, we have nothing more than sort of anecdote and examples and stories, no detailed financial analysis. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing for this matter. And what's the will of the body? Commissioner Polis.
Just a quick comment on page 12, line 19. I noticed there was an error in the language. It's obvious, 21.1213. I don't think that was right. I think it's 21.13 because it's stated on a previous page the same way, but with the right number. I guess that would be a staff question. Do you agree that's a typo?
Through the chair, Commissioner Polis, I agree that's a typo.
Okay.
So that will be fixed when we pass it on to the Assembly for consideration.
Commissioner Spinelli.
Yeah, in the matter of case 2022-0042, to recommend to the Anchorage Assembly approval of the ordinance amending Anchorage Municipal Code 2109050C2, use specific standards for accessory uses to encourage development of accessory dwelling units within the Girdwood Valley. I move to approve.
And Commissioner Spinelli, does your motion include the recommended amendments from the Planning Department?
Yes, it does.
Motion seconded by Commissioner Winchester. Commissioner Spinelli, would you like to speak to your motion?
Sure, I'm in favor of the motion. I think that the Girdwood community's been working on this for quite some time. I think it's a long time coming, and regardless of the testimony we heard tonight, whether the economics of it works or not to improve rental housing, I think more housing is more housing, and it does bring several existing buildings into compliance, as I know there are plenty of things that would qualify for a detached ADU that didn't qualify previously. So.
Okay, seeing no one further pending, we'll go ahead and call the vote.
Commissioner Strike?
Yes.
Thank you.
That motion passes. That's the last item on our agenda, so next we're just looking for a motion to adjourn. Motion by Commissioner Polis, seconded by Commissioner Winchester. No objection, that motion passes. We're adjourned. Thank you.